I picked up a new infrared filter recently at my local internet connection, effectively doubling the size of my infrared filter arsenal. Increasing it from 1 to 2. I went with a 720 nanometer filter because you can get color images or black and white images. It doesn't particularly excel at either one, but it puts you somewhere in the middle so as to get reasonable results, whichever way you decide to go with it. It's basically the slightly above room temperature soup of infrared filters. Speaking of soup, I'm sick. I went out and shot these images because I could tell that I was getting sick. Didn't know how severe it would get. Didn't know how long I'd be down with the sickness, which is not meant to be a reference to anything. So I wanted to get something shot because I'm incapable of resting, and at least if I'm laid up in bed for a while, I could work on some images and or video. That out of the way. Besides understanding that I'm shooting in infrared here, and that I'm new to infrared photography, thus not remotely an expert, not even close. An absolute beginner, actually. But the only other thing you need to know about to understand what you're seeing here is an editing technique that's common with infrared photography called channel swapping. So if you see mostly cool tones, blues and purples in the sky, that probably means I've channel swapped the image. Whereas if you see mostly warm tones, browns, reds, then you're probably seeing the image as it was shot, basically, directly out of camera. So here you go, I channel swapped this image, where the red channel became the blue channel and the blue channel became the red channel, and the green channel just remains the green channel. And after that, you're fresh out of channels. Here, I channel swapped this one as well. And I did feel like it looked a lot better for these two images to channel swap them. But that was more the exception and not the rule for me. Even though I think that's kind of the default look for color infrared photography, I found that more often than not, I didn't like it. I preferred the look straight out of the camera. So I've used an IR chrome filter before, but that's very different because that's mostly about the visible light part of the spectrum. But this is my first legit IR filter I've ever used. And so these are literally my first images. I suspected that I would want sunlight, and my wanting it and my suspecting it didn't make it happen. This shot here was the only shot I got with any sunlight, and yeah, it did kind of pop a little bit in a way the others didn't. So I'm thinking that 720 nanometer IR photography is not really meant for overcast conditions. Now, these last couple shots are not with my IR camera. These are just a stock camera, because the IR filter really cuts down the camera's usefulness in low light, so I didn't even attempt it. As it got dark, I just shot a few with my regular camera. Here I am on the next day. I was a little bit sicker, but still functioning at this point. I had a little bit of sunlight, but not that much particularly. The sun was still not cooperating. I had more, but it was still heavily filtered by clouds. I don't recall it ever coming out with any sort of intensity. So rather than capturing any grand vistas showing the American Southwest in all its majesty, I photographed a rock. A fucking rock. Okay, I suppose that's a vista, technically. Is it grand, though? That's the question. This all felt a little directionless while I was out here. Didn't quite know what I was looking for, didn't quite know what I was getting. I was seeing a lot of muted, brown, muddy-looking images on the back of my camera and just sort of hoping that they would ultimately pop when I got them into Lightroom. In a way that they didn't end up popping so much. Maybe a few of them. Generally, they still look kind of muted. Now, granted, I know that's because I don't have sunlight, and that's outside of my control. But, I had a little bit more directional light, and I was hoping that would make a bigger difference than it did. But oh well, I'll keep trying. This wasn't a smashing success, but it's a starting point from which to build. I suspect I'm going to end up viewing IR photography as kind of just another flavor, another option that's on the proverbial table for me when I'm out shooting. Akin to swapping lenses or shooting film versus digital, shooting IR versus visible light. Here's a channel swapped image. I like on some of these channel swapped images where they kind of end up looking like a snowy scene. This is a problem I faced repeatedly while editing, which is this image is so muted as to almost disappear. This image may have been cool with my visible light camera, but I actually despise the way it came out, both channel swapped and non-channel swapped in IR. Despise is a strong word. I just don't like it that much. Kind of the same feeling here. The composition is kind of strong, but the colors suck. And also it's kind of muted to the point of non-existence. Yeah, this is kind of a mixed bag. Similar feelings, but it was a little more successful. And I was fighting some pretty ugly lens flare, despite the sun being completely obscured. It's kind of a big problem with IR photography. Same day, but I moved out of the straight-up desert and closer to the river. It's just a little bit of time has passed. I have more sun, and this is probably the most successful IR shot I've gotten so far. At least in terms of what my expectation is for IR photography. That's more what I had in mind. I may have gone overboard on the cool tones on this one. But just some light sweeping across the scene is so vital. And these are all just more successful because of it. As I understand it, noon is actually a good time to go out for IR photography, which I certainly will try in the future. For this first outing, I just stuck to what I know, which is that I like it when the sun's low in the sky. I think this was so close to being a great shot, but I blew my composition ever so slightly. Wish I'd taken more than one shot of it. This shot I like a lot also. It has not been channel swapped, which I hope is obvious from my description earlier, because if not, I gave a poor description. Again, not channel swapped. I'm kind of going back and forth on these. The only criteria is I try to channel swap all of them, and the ones that look bad, I just don't use the channel swapped version. So far, that's been my criteria. I don't really understand how to predict that in advance. And maybe that's a skill you learn with practice. I will certainly be getting that practice after all the money I spent on the conversion. For that matter, all the money I spent on the camera that I later got converted. That was a perfectly good normal camera and is no longer. So if I hadn't spent all that money, maybe there would be a temptation to walk away. But no, I'm definitely sticking with it, even though I'm not all that good at it. I will be shooting IR photography interspersed with visible light, film, digital, whatever. Guess we're winding down now. This is the final image of the video, and swell, it's my car door. How inspired. What a great image to go out on.